to the Fostering AfterCare Podcast. I'm your host, Angie. This show is built around The Long Way Home, a 3-season journey into what it means to heal after foster care. Each season, we'll walk a different stretch of the road together. Here, in Season 1, we're exploring disenfranchised grief, the silent, complicated losses that come after aging out of foster care. Grief that often goes unseen, unspoken, or misunderstood. This is a space to name that grief, to heal out loud, and to remember that even if the road is long, you don't have to walk it alone. Expectations are often what we're met with after foster care, with very little guidance and sometimes even less grace, because we should already know. That's what people assume. But turning 18 doesn't mean we were taught how to be successful, healthy adults. It just means the responsibility shifted from our caregivers, the system, whoever was responsible for us. Now we're responsible for ourselves, but we were never taught the unwritten guidelines of how to be an adult. And that's what makes this hard. The roadmap isn't always written down. And in many traditional households, you learn it through family culture. It's not written down. You learn it by watching how your parents handle money, relationships, conflict, and responsibility. But those unwritten rules and guidelines for how to function and thrive in the real world can easily skip you when you've grown up in foster care. The expectations are still there, but the instruction isn't. And so the question I've come across is, how do I learn those unwritten guidelines of adulthood after 18? How can we even be aware of the quiet expectations of the world, of our society, in relationships, our financial well-being, and even of ourselves? Before we continue, I want to offer a self-care reminder to pay attention to your well-being while listening. Conversations about aging out, missed milestones, and adulthood can surface emotions that have been buried and suppressed for a long time. If at any point you need to pause this episode, step away, or come back later, please take that space to do so. Healing work is not meant to be done alone, and this podcast is not a replacement for therapy or professional support. If you're looking for additional care, check out A Home Within, this episode's sponsor. Their volunteer therapists commit to one client at a time and believe that stable, consistent relationships are the primary agent of change. So they agree to work for quote unquote as long as it takes. You'll hear more about them a bit later, but for now, visit A Home Within to get connected to mental wellness support at www.ahomewithin.org. There is no rush here. Healing takes time. Give yourself grace and utilize the resources available to you. Now, let's get back to the show. I want to introduce our guest voice today, my sister, Lola Bunn. Lola is a lived experience expert, a videographer, a creative, and a poet, and many other things too. She wears multiple hats. Her work gives language to becoming, to grief, to survival, and to the spaces in between. She can be reached at L'Oreal, Loreal.Bunn, Bunn, at yahoo.com. Take it away, Lola.
I'm an Adult by Lola. Won't, couldn't, shouldn't, can't, confused, helpless, lost, unlikely, unobtainable, improbable, impossible. At 18, I found myself unfathomable, the idea of a better me unimaginable. I told myself lack of vision, lack of motivation, lack of heart. I knew I was to blame. It had to be my fault. I chose to wade out into this sea of uncertainty. I'm an adult. If I stumble, I should know to catch myself. I'm an adult. My problems are mine alone. I told myself these words over and over until I was choking on them, suffocating in them, drowning. At 25, I find myself infinite, finally standing on land. It was a long, treacherous swim, but I'm glad to breathe freely. Though now I am ashore, I see the truth. The reason I felt safe to explore the unknown was the false, naive belief that the lifeguards I saw were for anything more than show. Lack of motivation? No. Lack of encouragement to be inspired. Lack of guidance to pick a path. It was no nurturing of vision. It was sending me out with a group of divers decked out in gear perfectly suited to their task while I got nothing, and somehow expecting the same result. I'm an adult. If I stumble, I might need someone to help catch me. I'm an adult. My problems can't always be solved by me alone. I'm an adult. With faith, resolve, and community, I'm sure anything is obtainable. I mean, against the odds, I've already done the impossible. Look at me. I'm an adult.
All right, let's give Lola some snaps for sharing such a beautiful and real view of how many of us feel navigating adulthood after foster care. Those feelings of overwhelm, confusion, deep shame, or longing have layers, which we will go more in depth about the layers of grief and layers of healing in future episodes. But let's talk a bit about it now. On the outside looking in, adults with foster care experiences tend to be given little grace. That was my experience, and others that I've spoken with. And the oftentimes shortcomings get labeled as personal failures. And well, there's some truth to that. That's really just one version of the story. In my experience, it is actually the collision of multiple realities: the personal, the relational, the communal, and the systemic, all happening at once, all placing expectations on us, often without support. Many of us were trying to heal and are trying to heal while also trying to just pay rent, to build relationships, to keep jobs, all while being measured against standards that assumed we had a stable upbringing, family safety nets, emotional regulation skills, and financial literacy that were never offered to us and never modeled to us. It may be assumed from the outside looking in as negligence, stupidity on our part, or something else. And there's a grief that comes with realizing something is missing, or maybe that many things are missing. And that grief doesn't usually arrive all at once. It shows up in moments here and there. It shows up when you realize there are things you were never taught. How to communicate in relationships without shutting down or over-explaining. I tend to over-explain. How to manage money without fear or avoidance. How to clean and care for your space in a way that feels sustainable instead of overwhelming. How to take care of yourself, your hygiene, preventing burnout, being clear about your own routines, boundaries, your mental well-being, without feeling guilty for needing rest or labeling yourself as lazy. Some of these gaps feel small at first, maybe, practical gaps. And some of them feel embarrassing to admit. Things that you think you should already know. Like, I should already know that. So you may stay quiet instead. Maybe you'll just, when you don't know something, just Google it. Or AI it these days. You watch other people, you figure it out alone. And it's solved in the moment and you don't really have to think about it too much. But other gaps are heavier. Other gaps are more obvious. And they touch things like safety And I would also say not just heavier, but also riskier, because you didn't know. They touch safety. They are intertwined with stability and self-worth, and they compound over time because when you're not taught how to care for yourself, your relationships, your living space, or your resources, the consequences don't stay in one moment. They become emotional, they become financial, relational, even generational. If we're not self aware, we don't have people around us that let us know. And also, if we're not open to that criticism, there's a way to be told things, and there's a way to tell things with tact, in love, with respect. So, but we do have to be open for that. So, yeah, over time, the grief isn't just about what you didn't learn, it's about realizing you were expected to know anyway. Even though you didn't know, you're still expected to know. I had several experiences with this. One that comes to mind was one of my last foster homes before I transitioned out of the system. And I remember I didn't really know the way that, and I say this because each home has their own set of rules, and the way people love for things to be done, they're all, each house has its own, and each foster parents, each situation has their own like house culture, so to speak, like the way things are done. And so there's a specific way that um, this foster parent wanted the bathroom to be cleaned. And long story short, I didn't clean it that way. And she didn't tell me directly, but I did hear her talking on the phone about how I didn't know how to clean. Mind you, I've learned how to clean from a mom who was OCD, currently is OCD, um, diagnosed, as well as a family member who was in the military and learned how to clean military style. So, with that said, however, I know that different people like things done a specific way and everything to be put back a certain way and all these things. But yeah, not only did she talk about me, she talked about my foster sister, and it was just not great hearing her basically gossip about me and my foster sister and the things we didn't know, and we were too old for that and all this type of stuff, as if like my age determined, in my particular situation, being in foster care, what I should or should have known. And maybe she was right. Maybe I should have known, but I didn't. And so I believe in that situation, it was a learning and a teaching moment that was missed. Um, she could have, in love, showed me how to do so. However, that's not what happened. And I was met with like very harsh judgment, very harsh words that I overheard, which I think hurts more to know you're being talked about. And it definitely creates fractures in that relationship, as it did. And that was kind of like how that relationship went until I requested to be removed, unfortunately. And so, as you can see, the weight builds, not because we aren't capable, but because we're trying to learn while already being held to that expectation and to that outcome. And so, with many situations similar to the one I just described, um, and meeting other adults with foster care experience, I noticed that we kind of came around to the same question, which is, where do we find answers if we missed that first training in childhood? And a home within that I talked about earlier would be a great place to unpack some of these questions and unpack some of this stuff that we've talked about today with a trusted therapist. So let me just go ahead and tell you more about A Home Within. A Home Within is a wonderful organization that is sponsoring this episode. They are the nation's currently the only nonprofit dedicated to the mental health of youth in foster care and young adults formerly in care by connecting us to free long term therapy. And this means, you know what this means? This means therapy for life. You're not going to age out of this mental wellness support. Their work centers around the belief that healing happens best when it's consistent, relational, and accessible. They connect individuals like us with therapists who understand the foster care experience and provide long term support. So, if you've been trying to carry everything that we've been talking about here on this podcast and just in life on your own, let me formally invite you to consider another option than you doing it by yourself. You deserve support and support that doesn't expire because of your age or because of whatever. So go ahead over to homewithin.org when you get the chance and connect with mental wellness support that will walk with you through each season of your life. Now, let's get back to the show. Today's faith flashback takes us back to a time when I was just out of care. I was renting a room from a woman I met on Craigslist. I talked a little bit about this in previous episodes. We met in person for the first time at a Bojangles after connecting online. The rent was about $400, $450. I still can't really remember exactly, but something like that a month. And I want to pause here for a second because I'm genuinely curious what rent looks like where you are right now as you're listening. Because even renting a room in 2026 can easily cost $1,000, $1,200 or more, depending on where you live. So I'm just kind of sitting on that because like $400, that felt like a lot to me at the time. And I didn't really understand like money and cost of living yet, or how income and expenses actually work together. But I mean, if I could have found $400 to rent a room today, wow. And I remember having later on in the story about a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. It was like $700. So it's just crazy inflation and all the other economical values. So even though it was considered affordable, it still felt like really heavy. It felt like a stretch because I didn't have much income at the time. So faith-wise, I was in a questioning phase. I mean, deep questioning. I remember I had so many questions. I had started Googling the contradictions, as I mentioned in previous episodes, contradictions of the Bible, contradictions of the faith, trying to make sense of what I had been taught. And the thing about the internet is that you can find proof for almost anything. If you search, especially now with AI, if you search one side of an argument, you'll find research to support it. If you search the opposite, you'll find just as much evidence there too. So instead of clarity, I just felt more confused. Around this time, I started separating myself from the church and from people who identified as Christian. I reached a point where I thought maybe I'm not a Christian anymore, and I was questioning just a lot. So I tried asking my Christian friends for answers, but they didn't really have them, or like the response didn't really make much sense to me. It didn't help me like feel settled with the answers. So when I was younger, I used to actually go straight to pastors with my questions. Like I would wait until the end of the service and then I would go right to the pastor, and I had like literally a list on a sheet of paper of questions. And I attended many churches, probably over 50 by that point. I sought out like women leaders and that held Christian leadership positions in the church. And I asked a lot of why questions. I asked a lot of how questions. I just wanted it to make sense desperately. I wanted logic. I wanted science. I really wanted understanding, but the pieces just weren't fitting together. And When I shared my confusion, I didn't feel like I was met with care. I felt again judged. And I was told things like, well, Satan is the author of confusion. So if you're confused, that's not good. I'm like, I know it's not good. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm confiding in you. That's why I'm asking questions. Or Satan is whispering in your ear. You shouldn't be asking any question. You shouldn't be questioning the Lord. And those responses really pushed me further away from the Christian community. I mean, if you don't have the answer, just say that. Like all this other stuff is kind of crazy in hindsight. I'm like, you could have just said you didn't know. And anyway, I was young, 19, 20, already dealing with other elements in life. And I was just trying to reach for God. I had a sibling in a behavioral health facility. I had siblings, I didn't know where they were. And it just really weighed heavy on me. Missed my parents, didn't know exactly where they were. They weren't available emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually for me. So it was really heavy at the time. And I just was trying to reach for God. I was trying to hold on, but I just couldn't feel him. And if you've ever been there, or if you're there now, and I know how painful that is. If you've ever been there, you know how painful that is. And it's isolating. It feels empty. It's scary actually. Um, and I truly believe that if I had received stronger answers, if I had felt warmth, if I had felt that love of Christ more clearly in that season, I probably would have leaned in deeper. I probably would have doubled down on my faith. I also want to say if you are feeling that way, feel free to reach out. My email is wherever you're tuning in from. You'll probably be able to find my email, but I'll say it here again. Hello at Quijada-Banks.com. I truly believe, as I said, that if I had, received stronger answers and felt that warmth of Christ, I probably would have still been connected, but that's just not what happened. Instead, over the next year, I went into a deep exploration of other faiths, other belief systems. I'm like, one of the questions I had was like, if, I was in China, would I still believe what I believe? And I was taking a like world societies or something like that class. And I studied Buddhism, I studied Islam, I studied a lot of the major world religions. Um, and in this world society class, I was learning about world history, learning about cultures, traditions, like the what are they called? I can't remember right now. Not the pygmy, yeah, the pygmy people, and so many other belief systems from around the globe. I became really fascinated by the idea of ethnocentrism. ethnocentrism. Check it out. By the question of why we believe what we believe. So again, like I thought, like, well, if I was in China, if I was born in China, I'd probably be Buddhist or another religion. And so, that really had me in a loop, threw me for a loop, because I was like, okay, so how do I know this is the thing to be um believing, right? Like I think in that particular time I was kind of going in the argument with myself, really, of like, am I dumb for believing this type of thing? So I was open. I was searching. I stayed in that spiritual exploratory space for several years. And again, you'll hear more about where that journey led me, but the experiences, those experiences really shaped who I am today. And you'll hear more about those experiences in episodes to come, and the lessons it taught me. But for now, let's move into the questions for today. All right, some questions to consider, journal about, meditate on, talk to your therapist from a home within about. Um, you don't have to answer them right now, of course, but what were you expected to know as an adult that no one ever taught you? That's number one. Two, When did you first realize adulthood felt more like trial and error than something you actually felt prepared for? Granted, I do want to say a little bit about that question though, because you can't prepare for everything, right? And people that don't have the foster care experience, that had two parent households that were very present, not perfect, but present, and they have obviously trial and error situations. Um, but in the sense of okay, I definitely could have known if I had a healthy, safe upbringing. That's the context of that question. And thirdly, where do you still feel behind or embarrassed for not knowing something that others seem to take for granted or others seem to just easily have or experience? Just notice what comes up. There's no right response to these questions. And for those who are supporters of people with lived experience in foster care listening, how can you help one person in the next 30 days by giving them grace and not assuming they know something already and instead guiding them through what would be deemed a common sense situation? I would also say this is for those with lived experience as well. Those with lived experience, you could do the same. Next 30 days, give people more grace, not assume they already know something, and instead guide them, show compassion. And how can you remind them that they're not on their own? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you as humbly as we know how, carrying many layers. Layers of responsibility we were handed to early, layers of grief for what we weren't taught, layers of shame we've been holding that were never meant to be ours, oh God. For those listening who feel behind, confused, or overwhelmed by adulthood, I ask that you meet them with gentleness, oh God. Remind them that learning late is not a failure, that becoming takes time, that you are not disappointed in their process. For those who are grieving what was missing, the guidance, the modeling, the unwritten rules, the safety, the answers, I ask that you hold that grief tenderly, oh God. Let it be seen, oh God. Let it be honored. Let it soften instead of harden our hearts. For those navigating life without a safety net, without a clear roadmap, without rest, I ask for provision. Not just financially, but emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. Provide the right people. Provide the right support. Provide the right moments of clarity, oh God. Release the weight of being expected to know what was never taught. Replace shame with compassion, oh God. Replace self-judgment with grace. Replace isolation with connection. And for those who are questioning, searching, or unsure where they stand with you, remind them that questions do not disqualify them from your love. It never did and never will. That you are present in all of the seasons of our lives, even in the unanswered ones, oh God. Teach us how to learn without punishment. Teach us how to rely on community and not live in isolation. How to grow in love without fear. We trust that you are not done with our story, oh God. That every season has meaning, and that we are encouraged to build a life that has joy, peace, love, and belonging. In the name of the Father, your Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Huge thank you to Lola for lending your voice and words to this episode. And I want to encourage you, in whatever season of adulthood you are in, it's not too late to start creating some clear guidelines for your life, to create traditional and core values that you stand firm on, your own traditions at different holidays or throughout the year. Take a look at your life today that you've built so far and the person that you're becoming. Do you like who you're becoming? Do you think some things need to change? What are your daily habits? And what would you like your life to be? To feel like? What is that experience of your life? We may not have been given a manual, but there is one that exists. And I have found a lot of clear instruction that has helped me and that has guided me in the Bible, and also with people who follow Christ's teachings. And it really has led me to still waters. If you have never checked it out, I invite you to join a Bible study or connect with the local church community to learn more about this ancient faith. You've been listening to the Fostering AfterCare Podcast. If you are enjoying Season 1, then I want to invite you to write a short review on the platform you're listening in so others can find this podcast. Right now, under the Long Way Home theme, we are exploring the quiet, complicated grief that follows us after aging out of foster care. If something in today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, even when the road feels long, you don't have to walk it alone. So, until next time, take care.